All right, so thank you for tuning in and jumping at the bit. I'm Kyle Edwards, of course. So, with the NFL season over, I did say I was going to do some more NBA topics, and on this episode, I'm going to talk about, my Celtics. Now, before they lost to Detroit on Wednesday night, they had a 9-game winning streak prior to that, which had them as one of the hottest teams in the NBA. So I kind of want to talk about what I've seen over this stretch of play. You can kind of backtrack until from January 1st until now. You've seen a change in their play, and talk a little about that. Talk about on the court. I think off the court, because they have made some changes to the roster, and kind of, I guess, give my take on coming out of the All-Star break, where I think this team can go in terms of their ceiling, or teams in the East that I think that they would match up well with, if they got into a playoff series. So I guess with that, we'll just start with, it was a pretty disappointing season for the Celtics up until this run of great play. They were a team that was hanging around 500. Fans going to the games were getting frustrated with their play because we saw a lot of isolation between Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Basically, if one of those guys had an off night, the chances of the Celtics winning were drastically lowered. That is probably the biggest change that has led to this better play, because Tatum, Brown I got to give them credit. They've made it a concerted effort to include the other members on the team more in the offense while still getting their numbers, because Brown and Tatum are really good at breaking down defenders and getting to their spots. They're both, pretty good, I would say, 3-point shooters, but they don't fully rely on that. And because of the increased ball movement and man movement on offense, as well as they push the ball more, like I said, from January 1st. And Brown is one of the best in transition in the NBA. So that just unlocks more of his game. And Tatum as well. Tatum can fill the wings and then, get to the hoop and all that. So that, I think, has been the biggest thing, is that they play with a lot more pace now than they did before, because when they were struggling, it was a lot of half-court sets, and basically it would just be Tatum or Brown kind of dribbling around, trying to get their offense, and then if they couldn't get it at the very last moment, it would be kicking to a guy, hopefully to make a jump shot. So definitely, it seems like that there's more trust in the pieces that are there in these two, which has led to the contagious act of passing down good shots to kick it out or kick it to somebody for a better shot. I think the second thing that you've noticed that the Celtics are doing better now is defensively. They are playing with more aggression. They are, getting into passing lanes more. They're contesting at the rim much better, because they have guys who are able to do that. It's not just like Rob Williams, Horford, who, when he's given a healthy amount of minutes, he can get you a couple of blocks a game. Now with the new acquisition of Daniel Tice, he's another guy who protects the rim as well. We've seen Tatum get some blocks recently. And you don't just have to get blocks to protect the rim. It's just early in the season, it would seem like teams would get, free drives to the hoop. That has stopped. There's always a Celtics player in front of them to either, block their shot at the rim or cut off their drive and force a tough fadeaway or force them to kick it back out. And because of that, I guess the number 3, they defend the 3 much better now. Once again, early in the season, when they're struggling, it seemed like they would give up open threes a lot. That doesn't happen anymore. So the defense plays more, I guess, on a string together. They're more aware of where the opposition is on the court, and they close out better. The next thing is, I guess, reshaping the roster or the rotation, and kind of plays into, Ime Udoka getting more and more comfortable with this group has led to this better play. Out are some guys who, you didn't want to leave them on the court too long because they would kind of get exposed for whatever reason. The biggest names that did leave were Schroeder. I think Schroeder's issues were more offensively. He's a guy that kind of plays at a slower pace because that's what works for him. His skill set is, catching the ball in the wing, getting down in an attacking stance, and then using his quick first step to get around defenders. Well, if that doesn't work, then the offense could get bogged down. So I was okay with the Celtics, sending him out. Now, Richardson was a tough player to part with, but Richardson's another one of those guys who can kind of get into the habit of slowing down the offense as well, because he's a guy who is most effective with the ball in his hand. And I think that was part of the reason why I think Brad Stevens was okay with letting him go and bringing in Derek White, because Derek White's a guy who is a ball mover. Quick decision. It's either pass, drive, or taking the shot. And that fits into Udoka's philosophy as well as Brad Stevens. The other guys that went out were kind of end of the bench types who didn't play much, but Schroeder, Langford was a guy who I guess was a significant piece that moved out. His issues were more of being not always available, which would of course affect his effectiveness on the court. So like I said, reshaping the roster, bringing in Tice and White as guys who fit the pace and all that Udoka's always wanted. I think the next thing that's really helped the Celtics out in this run is that I think Marcus Smart has finally figured out what his role is as a point guard. Now, he did get hurt in the Philly game, so we'll have to see. Haven't heard anything about a timetable with him. Didn't look good because he did roll his ankle. So we'll see if it's, days, weeks, months. I'm assuming it's probably be a couple of weeks. I don't know, but we'll see. But you could basically, attribute this run along the same time period as when I think Smart was out for a few games with some injury. I can't remember. And then he came back. And then from that moment, the team took off because Smart is playing basically the way that, Celtics fans want him to play, where he focuses on defense and running the offense. So defensively, he still hounds guards, point guards, shooting guards, whatever. He hounds them at the beginning of the possession. And then if he gets switched off onto a big man, it's kind of remarkable to see that he's able to hold his own against big men in the paint, because he's strong enough to, push him out a little bit. And then he's just aggressive enough that, he'll contest the shot. He might get his hand in there as you're raising up for a shot to get a steal or a deflection or something. But his defensive intensity has definitely rubbed off on the other players. And like I said, with the reshaping of the roster, they're now able to put 5 guys on the court that, with their defense, they switch a lot. So they're putting guys on the court who can fit that defensive scheme and thrive in it, which is why we're seeing them holding teams to, I think their defensive rating is like 97 points per 100 possessions or something like that, which in today's NBA is ridiculously low. I believe the second best team was like 9-10 points higher than that. And I think it's taken, Udoka a while to get this philosophy through Brown and Tatum's head, because of course with these teams, your best players have to buy in to then, get your other players to buy in as well. Because Udoka's thing has been, he wants defense and then getting out in transition. Play solid defense, force turnovers, take advantage of them in transition. And they're doing that. They're doing that so much better now. I know for me, and I'm sure, for you guys when you watch the Celtics play, they're more enjoyable to watch now. Last year, early part of this year, there were moments that were very frustrating, because you realized that there were talented guys on this team, but it just seemed like they couldn't all come together at once and play well together. It seemed like it was always one or two playing well, a couple of others having an off night. Now it seems like you know who you can rely on. You can rely on Brown and Tatum, of course. You can rely on Smart to give you his production because you know what you're getting. You can rely on Rob Williams. Now Derek White. And you're starting to get more production from, Payne Pritchard, who has to play a little bit more now that Schroeder's gone. We're seeing, Aaron Nesmith, finally get some run here in the past couple of games, and he's looked okay. But obviously with Brad Stevens, that's a quick little side note to this, is that going into the trade deadline, it was kind of obvious that the young group, which you would be, Grant Williams, who was a lock in the rotation because he's become such a weapon on the perimeter, as he's shooting like 45% from 3. And Brown and Tatum, trust kicking it out to him that he'll make the shot, which has been great for his growth. But so between Williams, who we know is a lock, Langford, Pritchard, Nesmith, there was the thought that maybe Brad would get rid of all of them, but he's going to at least get rid of at least one of them, because, Grant's grown. Pritchard has shown you something, a little bit of something when he plays. Nesmith has been up and down. He gives you energy at least. Now, Langford was the guy who is probably the higher touted player out of the 4 which made him the most frustrating one to watch because you would see glimpses of the talent Langford had, but it just wasn't sustained long enough to really think that he would be a piece of the future. So him moving on, he's going to San Antonio, where I think he's been there for a couple of years, hasn't really played. But if Popovich wants to include him into their future plans, I'm sure Popovich will, and his staff will get, hands-on with Langford to develop his game. But by obviously moving him on, Stevens is willing to go with the three other guys. Well, like I said, Grant has been great this year. But Pritchard and Neesmith looks like they're going to be given a chance to play. And for the rest of this year, it's going to be their chance to prove that they should stick around. And by sticking around, be a rotation player. As I touched on a little bit before, Udoka's growth has really helped this team out a lot because for the most part of this season, there was a lot of rotation tinkering with him. And I would see some Celtics fans on social media and stuff really getting upset by it because, like I said, it was Udoka's first year, and this is something I would tell people social media as well. But you had to give Udoka some time to get his system ingrained in these players' heads because realize the past few years they've been playing the way Brad Stevens wants it done. Listening to Brad Stevens' voice. You're bringing in a completely new voice with new assistant coach staff. Had to give them some time. Well, we're seeing that paying off now where, Udoka's comfortable and understands his players a lot more now. So where certain situations arise where he has to make a substitution, he knows who he can go to in certain situations. He knows what lineup combinations work. At least he knows that more now than he did earlier, where you're kind of just testing out lineups to see what works in certain situations. That may be the biggest thing that's different, but it's definitely something that is different with this team, and I'm so glad to see it because it seemed like some people were getting impatient with Udoka's way too early, and this latest run is a clear-cut sign of that. Now, looking at the run, people will say they beat a lot of bad teams, blah, 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 but that's kind of how it works in the NBA. You got to beat who you play, and it's not exactly a given that just because you're supposed to beat a team that you do beat them. I mean, look to a certain team in LA that is struggling against most teams. So whether they're championship contender or bound for the lottery, you still have to play well to beat teams in the NBA. So I mean, the best wins on this run have been, the Philly game where they completely dismantled them. That game, if you want something to be hopeful for in the second half, watch that game. Because they went up against a team with Joel Embiid, who usually gives them some trouble. But they went in with a clear game plan for Embiid, executed it perfectly, and diminished Embiid's impact. And that defensive performance that they put on Philly, yes, I know that James Harden wasn't there, but I don't think that would have changed much. But the plan that they had for Embiid, well executed, and we also learned that Grant Williams is a guy you can put on Embiid and feel okay with it. Going into the game, a lot of us just thought that Horford was the guy who had to be ready to go up against Embiid. But Horford got into early foul trouble. And because of that, we saw Grant Williams out there. And like I said, he more than held his own against him. So if that's a situation where you meet them in the playoffs later on down the line, in the back of your mind, you got to remember that Grant Williams now factors into the defensive game plan against Joel Embiid. They had a great win against the Nuggets team. Where once again, you were going up against a big man in Jokic, who gives a lot of teams fits. But they were able to, come out of that game with a win. I think in that game we saw Robert Williams take on the assignment of Jokic and held his own in that game. They beat a Hawks team that, for some reason, a lot of media people are considering them as like a sleepy, like dangerous team at the bottom of the, Eastern playoff bracket. But I'm not as sold on them as others are. Now, I know that they made their run in the playoffs last year, getting to the East Conference Finals, but to me, that was kind of a fluke situation where, they caught a Knicks team that clearly wasn't ready for the spotlight. They caught a Philly team, which we know had the whole thing with Ben Simmons, and then they ultimately lost to Milwaukee in the East Conference Finals. So the team that Atlanta is now is kind of more on the lines of what they actually are. But still, good win nonetheless. And I mean, the Nets game was pretty good, but the Nets are missing so many people that I wouldn't put it too high on the list of wins over this stretch. The Hornets game, I mean, that was a good win because the Hornets, another team that can give teams fits because of their I think the Hornets are trying to build themselves the way that Boston is right now, where defensively they can kind of just be, chameleons, having guys who, are all kind of around the same height, so they're able to switch off on everybody. The Hornets are still a young team. They still have some things to figure out, but I thought that was a good one for them. But now they're into the All-Star break, which probably comes at the worst time for them because they've been so hot. But some guys will need the break. I'm sure Jaylen Brown will love the All-Star break, a chance to kind of rest up. Hopefully we'll learn about Marcus Smart, here in the coming days. But, they will get tested coming right out of the break because they have the Nets first. And I'm assuming that, let me see who the Nets get. Well, Simmons, I don't think he'll be ready to play by then. But maybe Kevin Durant will be. So that's going to be a big game there. They get the Pistons again, which, I mean, I guess they'll be looking for revenge off of the Wednesday night game. And then the Pacers. So there's an opportunity there to come out of the All-Star break, winning 3 more, and, try to cement themselves as a top 6 team in the East. And I guess to be honest with you, like looking at the Eastern Conference right now, if the Celtics continue this play, I don't think it's that far-fetched to say that you would be shocked if they made the Eastern Conference Finals this year. Like I said, depending on what's up with Smart and how long he's out, might change that a little bit, because that will also kind of direct Brad Stevens and where to look in the buyout market as well. Because if Smart's down for an extended period of time, they're gonna need to bring in another lead guard from the buyout market, and it's kind of slim pickings because you're looking at guys like possibly like a DJ Augustine, or Tyreek Evans was just reinstated, but he hasn't played in 3 years, so I don't know what I would be getting in that situation. But, looking at the East, like I said, if it came out to a playoff series with the Celtics playing it the way they are right now, you would feel comfortable with them playing a Bulls team. You know it'd be tough, but you would feel comfortable going up against them. The Heat, if the Heat have everybody that they have, that could be tough, but you wouldn't be completely scared of them. Now the Bucks are a different breed because of Giannis, and he's kind of a matchup nightmare for a lot of teams. The Celtics, I will say, will at least have a plan for Giannis. So the Bucks are probably the team you fear the most in the East, but like I said, the way that they're playing now, you take your chances. Cleveland, because of their inexperience, you'd be fine there. Philly, like we just said, Philly has their own issues in terms of the playoffs. We'll have to see what Embiid and Harden look like whenever that duo gets on the court. But yeah, depending on what side of the bracket the Celtics end up on and matchups and all that, Eastern Conference Finals is not out of the question. I think that's the ceiling. I don't know about winning a title. Of course, that would depend on who would come out of the West, but I fully expect this recent run of play to continue into the second half, because I think the team understands it's the winning formula right now. So I am definitely encouraged by what I've seen. I liked the move for Derek White when they made it, and seeing him play a couple of games, really liked the move. And Tice fits in perfectly, so he just gives them another big man to throw into their rotation to go up against, Embiid's, Giannis's, Vucevic's, Jared Allen's, Embiid, whatever. The big men are there that you're going to have to pay attention to. And yeah, so just wanted to do this quick episode, this episode on the Celtics. And like I said, with no football, we'll definitely be talking more basketball from here on out. If ever baseball gets their act together, we'll work that in. College basketball as well. I'm starting to really get into college basketball right now because we're like 3 weeks out from the tournament, so definitely stay tuned for some college basketball content. But yeah, I'm really interested to see how this NBA season finishes, because right now it could go so many different ways. The Eastern Conference is really deep this year, and I think that there's an opportunity for the Celtics to get into the top 4. So you let me know what you think. Do you like the direction the Celtics are going in? Do you think it's sustainable? Think they'll be able to keep it up? Let me know, of course. And maybe give me who your sleeper team is in the East. I'll probably do another episode talking about some teams in the West. I don't know, but we'll see. So thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode. And as I always say, be safe out there. God bless. I'll catch you next episode. And I'm out. All right.